Hi everyone, I'm Vicky. Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to making the Valentine's Day dress. This is how we left the bodice at the end of part one. So the bone bodice is all made, the outside and the lining are joined together, and I've stitched the outside and lining together at the bottom, stopping just past that side back seam. So next we need to join the skirt on. So I've got the outside layer of the skirt, which is the heart fabric. I've got a cream satin lining, and then there's also a petticoat which I'm going to sew in. The first thing I'm going to do is sew on the outside heart layer. So I'm just going to pin this right sides together, matching all of my seams. So I'm pinning through all of the layers where I've got the bodice stitched together, but what I need to do is when I get to this part, I need to only stitch it onto the outside layer of the bodice. So I'm just going to make sure I only pin it to that layer. So you need to pin through all of the layers of the bodice at the points where it's sewn together, and then at this back part you just need to pin it to the outside. To sew the skirt on, I'm starting with each end. So I'm going to make sure I'm only catching the outside layer. So I'm going to fold that part back. So now I'm going to sew these two back parts, making sure I'm only catching the outside layer of the bodice here. So now I'm going to do the same at the other end. Okay, so the skirt is sewn on to the outside bodice just here, and I've done the same at the other end. So now I can start where that stitching ends and go through all of the layers as I sew the rest of it together. I'm just reversing so it's just where my stitching stopped. And now I'm going to go all the way along and sew through all the layers until I get to the same spot at the other end where I'll stop. That's the skirt sewn onto the bodice now. So on the outside it looks like it's joined all the way around, and then on the inside it's joined all the way through up until this point where it's just joined onto the outside layer. And now that's on, I can put my zip in, and that's the whole point of leaving this open part, is so I can get to where I need to get to sew the zip in. I'm just using an invisible zip, so I'm just going to stitch that in quickly, and then I'll show you how to join the petticoat and skirt lining. My zip's in, and I'm pretty happy with how it's sitting. So it was a bit tricky just sewing because this fabric's quite slippery, and because this is this centre back seam, the piece is a triangle, so this is on the bias. So because it was so soft and slippery and on the bias, to stop it stretching as I put the zip in, I just put a piece of interfacing along the edge to make sure it didn't stretch. Now that's done, I can attach my petticoat and the satin lining fabric, and I'm going to attach that to the inside of the dress. I'm just going to turn it inside out, and then I'm going to push the skirt through like that. So then I've got the bodice ready here to pin those onto. This is the petticoat that I found in my stash. It's just a sort of organza petticoat. It looks like it's got fishing wire through the hem to keep it stiff. I don't even remember buying this, to be honest. Whatever I bought it for, it didn't get used. It's been sat in a box for ages, so it's going to be perfect to add some fullness to the skirt for this dress. But it is too long at the minute, so I'm just going to measure the length I cut my skirt pieces to, and then I'm going to cut this down. It's got like a sort of stretchy fabric at the top here and an elasticated waist. But I'm just going to trim this down to whatever length I need this to be. I've also cut the lining out. It was a horrible nylon lining. It was really stiff and it had no fullness to it at all, so that's gone. It was sewn into this overlock seam here, so I just cut that out. My petticoat is cut to length, and next I need to make an opening for it. I'm going to have to gather it a bit. It is bigger than the dress by quite a bit, but I'm going to have to make an opening for where the zip opens. So this is where it's joined together. I'm going to cut down next to where it was seamed. I think now I've got raw edges. So I think the best way to finish that is if I just turn them in on themselves. Let's cut that off. So if I turn those raw edges in like that. I think that's the neatest way to create an opening. And then I'll just fold this part back as I sew it on as well, just so that top part's neat once it's sewn in. I'm just going to machine stitch around the edge of that just to hold it together. Okay, I've got my opening stitched. It's not perfect, but it's going to stop it fraying, and because it's on the inside, it'll be fine. So now I need to attach my petticoat to the bodice. So like the outside, I'm going to put this right sides together. I'm going to start it where the boning is, so it's next to the zip and it's not going to get folded up with the seam allowance. And like the outside layer, I need to just sew this to the open bit here and then through all the layers further on. So I'm just going to fold that bit back and put it right sides together on here, just where that boning starts. I'm going to have to sort of measure and gather this. I'm just going to put some little pleats and gathers in as I go, just to take up that excess size. And the same the other side. Okay, so I'm going to gather and pin that all the way around so it's kind of even. I'll measure it and divide it into quarters so it's gathered evenly around. And then just as I did for the outside, I'm going to stitch this part and then stitch through all the layers and then keep this part separate as well. So same process as for the outside layer. Okay, so my petticoat is sewn on. I've still got my little open gap at the back there. It's getting shorter each time as I sew sort of the overlap bit, which is why I started with it so wide, as well as being able to get into the zip. I needed it that wide. So we've got the petticoat sewn right sides together with the inside. We've got the heart skirt sewn right sides together with the outside, with the bodice sandwiched in between. The last layer to put on is our satin lining. So I'm going to do exactly the same again. I'm going to pin it on. So I'm matching up my seams as I go. Just like before, I'm going to stitch the open ends first, then stitch through everything in front of that. This time, instead of sewing it from this side, I'm actually going to sew it from the heart side, where the skirt's already sewn on, partly because this is really soft and I'm worried I'm going to catch it, but also it means I can follow our original line of stitching here, and if I stitch right over that, that means everything's going to be lined up perfectly and there'll be no stitching higher or lower visible on the bodice, either on the outside or the inside. Okay, I've got all of the layers of the skirt joined on, and I've stitched just down the inside of the lining next to the zip, but I've stopped at the waist because I'm going to need to get inside that opening at the bottom of the zip to be able to do a bag hem on it later. I'm really happy with the shape of the skirt. The stiffness of the cream satin combined with the petticoat has just made it really lovely and full. I think it's a really nice proportion with the bodice, and I really like the length as well. So the last sewing jobs I've got to do on here are to hem it and just to finish down hand sewing the lining to the inside of the zip. But I'm not going to do that yet because I want to start rhinestoning the skirt. It's just going to be easier to do it while I can get inside of it. But because I'm going to have roses here, I'm just going to rhinestone from about there down to about here, so I've got enough to cut for the hem as well. To do that, I'm going to keep the dress on the mannequin, but then lift the skirt up onto my ironing board to do. So I'm going to move over there and I'll show you how I'm doing that. But meanwhile, over here, I've got two dogs who are being really, really good today. It's Saturday afternoon and everyone else is out and I'm working on my dress, so they've come to hang out with me and they've just been asleep. This is what they're normally like in here. I don't know what happened yesterday when Ivy was crazy. Hey, gorgeous. Hey, Ivy. Oh, my good girl. Oh my God, they are so asleep. All right, I'm going to leave them to sleep. I'm not going to wake them up and unleash the Kraken. To rhinestone the skirt, I've left the dress on my mannequin. I've brought it over to the end of the ironing board and I've dropped it so it's as low as it goes and the waist is almost level with the ironing board. Then I'm just picking up the outside layer of the skirt that I want to rhinestone. And I put a bit of baking paper underneath it so the rhinestones don't stick to my ironing board, because it's quite a fine fabric. I think the glue is just going to come through a little bit. So this way, after each section is done and dried, I can just spin the dress form round and move on to the next part of the skirt until I've worked my way around. This part's slow, not because of the time it takes to actually stone each part, but because I've got to let it dry each time before I move it. So I'm going to start this now, and I've got work to do for clients that I'll do in between stoning this skirt. To stone it, I'm using cyan red in SS20, golden shadow in SS16, and I'm using my usual Fabrifuse and wax pencil to put it on. And I'm going to do 3 red stones on each heart. So I'm going to do 2 sort of near the top and then 1 nearer the bottom. And that's going to sparkle the hearts up nicely. And then I'm just going to do 1 golden shadow between each heart, just to add some of that sort of nude gold, pale gold sparkle to it. I think any more than this, I'm going to be here forever. I'll probably use more crystals on the bodice. So that's what I'm going to do all over, but I'm going to stop about probably 4 rows of hearts up from the bottom, and I'll do those after it's been hemmed. So I'll see you in a few hours, days, however long it takes me to do this whole skirt. Meanwhile, sleepy puppies are still sleepy. Hey, beautiful Willow. Oh, they're being so good today. While the rhinestones are drying, before I can turn the skirt around and do the next bit, I thought I'd just start playing with the roses and seeing how they're going to work. So I'm going to use some of the big roses. I'm definitely going to use some of the leaves. And then I've pulled some of the roses apart. These ones are quite fat, they're quite deep. So I've got 3 that are shallower, which look good sort of on the top of the bust and on the waist. But because these are quite chunky, they're too big to go up here. So I've actually pulled them apart to create a little bud. And then I've cut individual petals off as well. So I think I'm going to use some petals, some buds, some of the big flowers, and then lots of the leaves, because I think it needs the green through it as well. But I'm pretty happy with the overall placement, which is how I drew it. I was originally thinking that I was going to put rhinestones on the roses, but I don't think it needs it now I see them against the skirt. So I'm actually just going to sew them on and not stone them. And then I'm going to stone the rest of the bodice and any bits of the hearts you can see around the waist. I thought I'd just show you the finished dress before I start putting the roses on. I did end up sparkling up the whole thing. I've done stones all over. I thought it would be easier than trying to fill the gaps after the roses were on. This dress is a cute dress just as it is. You could easily just leave it like this without the stones even and wear it. But because it's me, I'm going to add the roses. I'm just using a red and green thread to hand sew all of the petals and flowers and leaves onto the dress. The fact that I'm hand sewing these on, and because I've stoned the whole dress, means I can take these off and use it without the flowers in the future. Here's my finished dress, and I don't like it. I'm not happy with it at all. I like the dress, the underneath dress is gorgeous, but I'm really not happy with the roses. They're just too big and too deep and too chunky for the look that I really wanted to achieve. I thought I could get away with it and sort of take them apart and flatten them a bit, but they're still just too big. I think I've come too far around the waist and I've lost the waist shape here. It might work if I took the waist ones off and left the bust on. Then it doesn't really give me that sort of maximalist flower dress look that I was going for. I think basically what would have saved it is having much smaller roses. I could have got that really sort of encrusted, clustered look that I wanted, whereas here I've got what, sort of 4 or 5 roses there, and it's just too big and chunky, and yeah, I'm really not happy with it at all. I thought about deleting these videos and not showing you the finished dress, but I think it's important to talk about the fact that things don't always go to plan. They don't always look like they're going to look in your head, and sometimes you just got to admit defeat and give up and change your plan. I don't have time to redo this before Valentine's Day, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the roses off, I'm going to put it in a box until next year, and maybe we'll revisit this Valentine's Day next year and see what I can do with this dress to make me love it again. Because I am happy with the underneath. I am happy with the underneath. It's just the roses. I started this design with the idea of using what I already had, which is why I use these roses, because I've got boxes of flowers and fabrics and all sorts, so I want to try and start using some up. But what I had just didn't work with my design. Maybe if they were around the hem it would be better, because then it doesn't matter if they're bigger. So that's it for this Valentine's Day. I should be in love, but I'm not. So it is what it is. So I think maybe for another series I'll do another flower dress, try and redeem myself, and maybe try and use all of my flowers. I've got, I think, 3 plastic tubs full of fake flowers. So it'd be pretty cool to do a big gown with lots of flowers on it, and they're all different colours as well. There's lots of red and pink, but there's some other colours in there too. So something a bit more multicoloured, maybe on a pink tulle dress with lots of flowers. I'll get thinking. I won't let this put me off. And I'll be back soon with another video. Happy Valentine's Day. I hope your day of love is better than the day of love with my dress.